That's part of what makes me say the first Holmes novel was not really a Holmes novel, but mostly I mean that in the opening section, it's all about Watson. I was saying this just the other day on a podcast called the Watsonian Weekly.
What is this strange thing called a podcast? It sounds like science fiction. And there are people running around calling themselves Watsonians? What a strange world you inhabit. I tried my hand at science fiction, you know, but it was nothing like this. But how is Studying Scarlet a story about Watson?
I see it as the story of a doctor down on his luck, looking for a new direction, something like you, Sir Arthur, shifting from medicine to literature. Only for Watson, the literature he writes will be celebrations of Sherlock Holmes. Actually, that is quite like you. And then in the sign of the 4, you have Watson pursue a romance. And you end up marrying him off. It's like something out of Jane Austen.
Jane Austen? Piffle. She wrote matrimonial novels.
But isn't that what the sign of the 4 is? Oh, I know, there's a great chase scene on the Thames, and the mystery, and the treasure, but really it's about rejecting all that and settling down, marrying.
Be that as it may, I couldn't leave Watson settled, could I? I had him off on his adventures again. Holmes's adventures, I should say.
And it's true, if the career goal he found in the first novel was to celebrate Sherlock Holmes, you had to bring them together again.
Well, actually, it was just to get a foothold in the literary world so that I could have time to devote to my serious novels.
Oh, Sir Arthur, if there's anything I can convince you of tonight, it is of the serious merit of Sherlock Holmes, or of the stories you wrote around him. They deal with all sorts of interesting themes, the dangers of reputation.
The dangers of reputation?
I don't know how many stories present crimes due to characters wanting to preserve their reputation, leading them to murder their blackmailers, or put their own sons in jail. And then there's the recurrent theme of the decline of England.
The decline of England? My dear boy.
All those decaying manor houses, and the need for new blood, the supernatural hound that threatens an ancient family, and then of course it all comes crash during World War I.
Yes, when the east wind was supposed to sweep through and cleanse things. I had Holmes say that, but then I just worried we would repeat ourselves, repeat the war, or just grow old and weak and feeble. The creeping man had an antidote for that.
Yes, monkey glands, to let old men marry young women.
Well, if you must put it that crudely.
Which reminds me of the earlier stories full of love triangles, much like the one you were in yourself.
I was never in any love triangle. How dare you?
I mean, married to Louisa, but falling in love with Jean Lecky.
I was always perfectly proper, caring, supportive of dear, dear Louisa. I would never do anything to hurt her. But she was very ill, of course, tuberculosis.
And so you took up with Jean.
I never took up with anybody. What a suggestion. Jean was a dear friend.
Who you later married.
It's not a crime to marry.
My point, though, is how triangles showed up in your stories around that time. Like in The Solitary Cyclist, where there's a woman with a fiancé who's pursued by other men. Quite literally pursued by one on a bicycle.
But he's protecting her.
Is he, though? But this does remind me of the prejudice against fiancés in your story.
Prejudice against fiancés? You do come up with some strange ideas.
It's what literary scholars do. But you must admit that none of the fiancés come off very well. They're either missing altogether, leaving Sherlock Holmes to come to the rescue of their damsels in distress, or they give positively wrong-headed advice, like telling Helen Stoner it's all in her head. Her stepfather couldn't possibly be planning to kill her. She'd have been dead if she listened to him. Did she go off and marry him, by the way?
want me to tell you what happened after the story? Why, you're just like all the rest of these games players.
Touché, Sir Arthur. So let's talk of why you think Sherlock Holmes has survived so well.
I wish he hadn't. I kept trying to kill him off, but he was like Dr. Frankenstein's monster, or one of those vampires like my friend Bram Stoker created.
Or maybe a sort of god whom people worship. Watson worships him.
Yes, Watson. Poor Watson. I let Holmes rather put him down from time to time, though other times you can see true affection between them. Like the time in The Three Garridebs when Watson gets shot, or in The Devil's Foot when they tried that poisonous drug together.
They are an enduring couple, are they not? Much more so than Watson and his wives, however many he may have had. There's a lot in the stories on couples, and often they're not happy, the husbands and wives, but they're not happy. But there's Holmes and Watson happily enjoying each other's company. Is it possible that it was the partnership with Watson that is so enduring? Can you imagine Holmes without his Watson?
I did it a couple of times. In The Lion's Maid, for instance, about the jellyfish. Holmes told his own story there.
And laments the absence of Watson.
Very true, very true. They go together like bacon and eggs, or roast beef and Yorkshire pudding.
I wanted to talk to you about, not roast beef, I want to talk to you about eggs, actually. The eggs in Thor Bridge that get overcooked because the new cook is distracted by a romance story in a magazine. Did you put that in to echo the theme of disruption caused by romance? That's what the story's all about, and I thought the little egg scene reflected that.
You do come up with odd perspectives. I had to fill some space, so I mentioned breakfast. Or maybe it just showed Holmes and Watson interacting. They could have been complaining about the weather just as easily.
Well, we'll move on from breakfast to...
I must interrupt here. This has all been very interesting and amusing, but I don't believe for a second that that is Conan Doyle at the podium. And what's more important, it's that everyone knows that Conan Doyle didn't write the stories. Doyle was just a literary agent.
Now, wait just a minute. How dare this person question my authorship?
The so-called stories are in fact true accounts of actual events.
Why, if I weren't a disembodied spirit, I would come down there and show you what's actual and what's not.
Gentlemen, no fighting, please.
I could demonstrate my skill at baritsu. That's Japanese wrestling, you know.
It's Bartitsu, Sir Arthur, and it was Holmes who knew it, not you.
I think perhaps we should wrap this up. We can continue the discussion over a drink, perhaps, and I will in a moment adjourn to the table at the back to sign some copies of my book. So thank you all very much.